Before we dive in, this is part 3 of the story. If you haven't watched part 1 and part 2 yet, I highly recommend starting from the beginning to catch all the details. The link to part 1 will be in the top right corner now. Trust me, you'll want to know how we got here. All right, let's get back to it. All right, Wes whispered. Faculty office is down the main hall near the principal's office. Stay close and don't make too much noise. I glanced back at Tommy, who was clutching his pocket knife like a lifeline. You good? Tommy nodded, forcing a grin. Let's just get those keys and get out of here. Don't want to run into one of them again. We moved cautiously through the dimly lit halls, our eyes darting to every shadow and flickering light. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint sound of our breathing and the sound of our steps. As we rounded a corner, Wes held up a hand, signaling them to stop. He squinted into the darkness ahead, where the faint glow of an exit sign illuminated the door to the faculty office. There, he whispered. Wes nodded and moved forward, but just as we reached the door, the sound of something shifting echoed down the hall behind us. All three of us froze, eyes widening as we turned to look back. What was that? Tommy hissed. Probably the lurker, Wes muttered, fumbling with the office door. We've got to be quick. I tightened my grip on the wrench in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. Just get the keys, Wes. Tommy and I'll keep watch. Guys, it's locked, he muttered, stepping back. Tommy let out a frustrated huff, gripping his pocket knife. We don't have time for this. Let's break it down. Don't, Wes snapped, holding up a hand. You'll just make too much noise. Give me your pocket knife instead. Tommy hesitated for a second, then handed it over. Wes crouched by the lock, squinting as he wedged the knife into the mechanism. Keep an eye out while I work on this, he muttered. Me and Tommy exchanged a glance, then turned our attention back down the hallway. The silence wasn't comforting. It felt alive, like it was waiting to pounce. You know how to do this, right? Tommy whispered over his shoulder, his voice laced with doubt. Sort of, Wes grunted, concentrating. Saw my brother do it once. Could be worse, though. You could be the one doing it. Tommy rolled his eyes but didn't respond. His grip on the screwdriver tightened as a faint noise reached our ears. A soft scraping sound, like claws on tile. Wes, I whispered urgently, hurry up. I'm going as fast as I can, Wes hissed back, frustration seeping into his voice. The scraping grew louder, followed by a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down our spines. My heart pounded as I glanced over my shoulder. A shadow moved at the far end of the hallway, tall and hunched, its uneven gait growing faster. Wes, Tommy said, his voice sharp now. With a triumphant click, the lock gave way, and Wes pushed the door open. Got it, he whispered, motioning for us to get inside. But before we could even move, the lurker charged. Its claws scraped the floor as it lunged towards us. Move! Tommy barked, shoving Wes into the room. I darted in after him, slamming the door shut just as the creature's claws raked against it. The force of its attack shook the door in its frame. Block it, Wes shouted, and Tommy and I scrambled to shove a filing cabinet against the door. I heaved one side while Tommy pushed the other, the screech of metal on tile echoing in the small office. Just as the creature slammed into the door again, they managed to wedge the cabinet in place, holding it shut. The lurker howled outside, the sound guttural and furious, its claws scraping relentlessly against the wood. For a moment, the three of us stood frozen, breathing hard and staring at the door, waiting to see if it would hold. Tommy broke the silence first, his voice shaky. Please tell me it can't get in here. Wes shot him a look. You saw Greg's car? I exhaled, wiping sweat from my brow. "All right," I said. "Now, let's find those keys first. We're gonna make it somehow." We spread out, rummaging through drawers and cabinets as the lurker continued its assault on the door. Every now and then, the cabinet shifted slightly, but it held firm. After what felt like an eternity, Wes let out a triumphant whoop, holding up a ring of keys. "Got 'em," he said, grinning. "Great," Tommy muttered. "But how are we gonna—" Wes furrowed his brow, glancing at me and Tommy. "Is that—" I tilted my head, listening closely. A powerful, soulful voice echoed faintly through the halls, accompanied by the unmistakable rhythm of Jefferson Airplane's "Somebody to Love." "It's music," Tommy said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "Where the hell is that coming from?" Wes' eyes darted to the door. "It's loud," he muttered. As if on cue, the scraping at the door ceased. The lurker let out a sharp, guttural snarl, and we heard its heavy footsteps retreating down the hall, the sound fading as the music swelled. My grip on the wrench tightened as I exchanged a look with the others. "Whatever that is, it distracted it. We can't waste this chance." They nodded in unison, our fear temporarily overridden by determination. Wes cracked open the door just enough to peek outside. The hallway was empty, but the music filled the space, coming from somewhere deeper in the building. "It's clear," Wes whispered, opening the door wider. The three of us slipped out into the hall, moving swiftly but cautiously. The glow of flickering overhead lights made every shadow seem alive. The music grew louder as we approached the exit, the lyrics almost surreal in our clarity. "Don't you want somebody to love?" Tommy muttered under his breath. "What kind of psycho is playing this right now?" I shook my head. No idea, but whoever it is, they might have just saved our asses. Just as we reached the main entrance, we stopped short. A figure stood in the middle of the hallway, leaning casually against the wall. The acrid scent of cigarette smoke wafted towards us as the man exhaled a cloud of smoke, the glowing cherry of his cigarette briefly illuminating his weathered face. Slung casually over his shoulder was a shotgun, its barrel gleaming faintly under the dim lights. "Well, what do we have here?" the man drawled, his voice raspy but calm. He took another drag of his cigarette, his eyes narrowing at us. "You boys got a death wish, or are you just stupid?" Tommy gawked at him, his eyes darting between the shotgun and the man's face. "You're the janitor, right?" "Sharp as a tack," the janitor replied dryly, flicking ash onto the floor. "Now, are you going to keep standing there with your mouths open, or are you going to tell me why you're sneaking around my school while there are monsters out there?" I couldn't shake the odd vibe the janitor gave off. There was something too relaxed about his posture, like he wasn't fazed by this whole situation. It didn't add up. "We're trying to get out of here," I said cautiously. "Our car's totaled, and we're heading for the bus outside. The music, was that you?" The janitor smirked, a faint glint of amusement in his eyes. "Guilty as charged. Got a little creative with the PA system to draw those freaks away. Worked better than I thought." He lowered the shotgun from his shoulder, gripping it with both hands. "Now, I'm guessing you're not the only ones here. Where's the rest of your group?" Wes stepped forward. "Yeah, we were just getting the keys." The janitor smirked. "Figures. Only reason anyone'd stick around this mess." I couldn't hold back anymore. I stepped closer, my voice low. "You're not freaking out like everyone else. Do you know what's going on here, these things? You seem like you've dealt with them before." The janitor's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing. "I've seen enough to know you're in over your heads." He leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You think this just happened out of nowhere? Ask your parents if you can find them." My stomach twisted at the cryptic response. "What does that mean?" I pressed. "Do you know what these things are? Why they're here?" The janitor straightened, his expression hardening. "Time's running low, kid. I ain't got the luxury to play 20 questions, and neither do you. You've got people waiting on you." He let out a long sigh, his eyes briefly softening. "Just do yourself a favor. Get your friends, get that bus, and get as far from here as you can." I didn't look away, suspicion gnawing at me. "You won't come with us?" The janitor chuckled dryly, though there was no humor in it. "Because some messes don't get cleaned up by running away." He looked down at the shotgun in his hands, his face clouded with something unspoken, guilt, maybe, or regret. "Besides, I've got my own business to finish here." Wes frowned. "Business? You mean—" The janitor cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Doesn't matter. What matters is you kids getting out alive." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small revolver. He flipped it open, revealing 6 bullets inside the cylinder, then handed it to me. I hesitated but took it, feeling the cold weight of the gun in my hand. I don't know how to use this." "You'll figure it out," the janitor said. "Don't waste your shots, and don't let your hand shake when it matters." Tommy glanced at the janitor. "You're really not coming with us?" The janitor slung the shotgun back over his shoulder, stepping past us toward the shadows of the hallway. "Good luck, boys. You're gonna need it." As he walked away, his voice echoed faintly back to us, tinged with something between resolve and resignation. He began humming, then softly singing, "Don't you want somebody to love?" The haunting tune followed us as we made our way to the exit, the janitor disappearing into the dim halls. As Tommy, Wes, and I stepped out of the school and into the cool night air, the group waiting near the parking lot turned towards us. Demi spotted me immediately, throwing her arms around me in a tight hug. I stiffened for a moment, surprised, before hugging her back. "You're okay," Demi whispered, her voice shaky. I thought something happened." "We're fine," I reassured her, pulling back slightly. "I told you we'd be fine." Greg leaned against the wreckage of his car, letting out a low whistle. "Glad you made it." For a second there, I thought. "A bit of trouble," Wes muttered, holding up the keys. "But we got what we came for." "Yeah," Tommy added, his tone more serious. "And we ran into someone." Demi stepped back, looking up at me. "Who?" "The janitor," I replied, glancing at the others. "He's still inside, armed, prepared, like he knew something about what's happening." Claire crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, knew something?" "He wasn't surprised," I said. "Not about the lurkers or anything. When I asked him what he knew, he told me we should ask our parents." A heavy silence settled over the group, broken only by the faint rustling of wind through the trees. The weight of my words seemed to sink into each of them. Claire's face twisted into a grimace. "Our parents?" "Yeah," Tommy chimed in, rubbing the back of his neck. "It wasn't like he was guessing. He said it like a fact, like they'd know exactly what's going on." "And none of us have been able to reach them," Claire pointed out, her voice tightening. "Think about it. Kev tried. Greg and I both tried. Not one of them answered. Doesn't that seem off?" Greg frowned, shaking his head. "Come on, Claire. Are you saying our parents are involved in this somehow? That they have something to do with those things?" "Why not?" Kev countered, stepping closer to him. "Look at the facts. The party, the outbreak, the city. None of this is random, and not one adult we know has answered their phone. Except for Tommy's uncle, who lives in the outskirts." Demi, still holding onto my arm, spoke up hesitantly. "But my parents?" Your parents. Why would they? She trailed off, her voice faltering. I don't know, Claire admitted. But maybe they're connected somehow. Maybe they didn't cause this, but maybe they knew it could happen. Even if they knew something, Wes interjected, his tone measured. How does that explain what's happening now? How does that lead to these creatures? Claire shrugged, frustration evident in her voice. I don't know, Wes, but we've got nothing else to go on. I looked down at the revolver tucked into my waistband, the janitor's parting gift still heavy in my hand. It doesn't matter what he meant. If our parents are involved, or if they know anything, we need to find them. We start with checking our houses. And what if the lurkers show up again? Demi asked, her voice uneasy. My jaw tightened as I looked at the group. Then we have to fight them off, just like we did in the school. Sounds like a suicide mission, Kev muttered, but there was no real bite in his voice. Tommy clapped Kev on the shoulder. That's why we stick together. No one's going down on their own. Demi squeezed my arm. Just don't do anything stupid, okay? I won't, I promised, looking her in the eye. We'll figure this out. All of it. Greg glanced at the others, his expression resolute. Let's hope we're not too late. With a nod, we began to make our way towards the bus, our steps heavy with determination and dread. We all piled into the school bus, the metallic clang of the door shutting behind us reverberating through the silent parking lot. Greg climbed into the driver's seat, holding the key like it was a ticket to salvation. He slid it into the ignition, twisting it with a sharp click. The engine roared to life, rumbling beneath our feet. Yes! Greg whooped, pumping his fist. We all joined in with a mix of cheers and relieved laughter, the tension in the air loosening slightly. All right, driver, Tommy said, leaning against the back of Greg's seat. Let's get out of here. First stop, Kev's house. Kev lives closest, right? Wes asked, settling into a seat near the front. Kev nodded, still catching his breath as he flopped into a seat. Yeah, not far. Left on Harbor Avenue, then about 5 blocks. My street's Elmwood. Demi sat down next to me, her hands gripping the edge of the seat as she glanced out the window at the empty schoolyard. Do you think it's going to be like this everywhere? Empty? Probably, Claire said, sitting across the aisle. Destroyed? Let's hope not. As Greg carefully maneuvered the bus out of the parking lot and onto the main road, the city unfolded around us in eerie stillness. Once busy intersections were strewn with overturned trash bins, shattered glass glinting in the faint glow of streetlights. Cars sat abandoned, some with their doors hanging open like silent warnings. The faint scent of smoke lingered in the air, and shadows seemed to move in the periphery of our vision. This is unreal, Tommy muttered, his eyes scanning the streets as he leaned against a window. It's like a ghost town. Yeah, Kev added, but a ghost town with bite marks. Greg huffed a laugh as he made a sharp turn. That's a terrible tagline, dude. Don't put that on a postcard. Oh, I'm sorry, Kev shot back. Didn't realize we were auditioning for the city's tourism board. Thought we were running for our lives. Focus, guys, Wes said from his seat. We're literally driving through the apocalypse and you're arguing about slogans? Hey, Tommy said, grinning slightly. If we're going out, we might as well keep it entertaining. You know, lighten the mood. Lighten the mood? Claire raised an eyebrow. We've got a bus, lurkers hunting us, and a whole lot of questions. Not exactly a comedy show. Do you guys ever take anything serious? Sounds like a bad action movie, I muttered, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Demi elbowed me lightly. It's not funny. I know, I replied, my tone softening. But maybe Tommy's got a point. A little laughter might keep us sane. The bus hit a pothole, jolting everyone slightly. Greg winced. "Sorry, this thing drives like a tank, and it's not exactly an off-roader." "Yeah, well, just don't total it like you did your last car," Kiev quipped, earning a chorus of groans and a muttered, "Too soon," from Greg. We lapsed into silence again as we drove down Elmwood, the houses looming ahead. Most of them were dark, the occasional flicker of a porch light the only sign of life. When Greg finally slowed the bus in front of Kev's house, the group leaned forward, peering out the windows. Kev stared at his house for a moment, his expression unreadable. The small, two-story home looked mostly intact, though one of the windows was shattered, and the front yard was littered with debris. "Looks quiet," Greg said, killing the engine. "Too quiet," Tommy muttered, his hand instinctively going to the pocket where he kept his knife. I stood near the front of the bus, my hand resting on the door handle as I addressed the group. "Kev, Tommy, and I will check the house. The rest of you stay here and keep watch." Greg, still gripping the steering wheel even though the bus was off, nodded. "If anything happens, I'll honk the horn. Don't take too long." Demi shot me a worried look. "Be careful, okay?" I gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We will. Just stay put." With that, I stepped out of the bus, Tommy and Kev following close behind. The three of us approached Kev's house cautiously, our footsteps crunching on the debris-strewn driveway. Kev glanced nervously at the windows as we reached the front door. "Do you have a key?" I asked. Kev nodded, pulling it from his pocket and unlocking the door. The hinges creaked as we stepped inside, the faint smell of dust and something metallic lingering in the air. "Mom? Dad?" Kev called out, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet house. There was no reply. We moved through the hallway, our shoes scuffing against the wooden floor. Kev led us into the kitchen, where the faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. On the table, a folded piece of paper caught Kev's eye. He picked it up and unfolded it, frowning as he read aloud. "Kev, your dad and I went to dance class. Leftovers are in the fridge. Be safe. Love, Mom." "Dance class?" Kev said, his brow furrowing. "That's weird. My parents don't dance, like, ever." We exchanged a glance as Tommy walked over to the fridge. "And they lied about the leftovers," Tommy said as he opened the fridge. Kev ran a hand through his hair, his confusion deepening. "This doesn't make any sense. My mom doesn't leave notes. She usually just shoots me a text or calls me up." My expression darkened. "Do you think—" I hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I know you don't want to hear this, but what if our parents do know something about what's going on? What if they're really involved somehow?" Kev shook his head, his voice rising slightly. "No way. My parents wouldn't lie to me like this. Maybe they're just trying something new. It's possible, right?" "Kev," Tommy said, shutting the fridge, "they left you a note about leftovers that don't exist. That's not just something new. Something's off." I sighed. "I'm not saying they're responsible, but whatever's going on, they might know more than they're letting on." Kev didn't respond, his jaw tightening as he stuffed the note into his pocket. "Let's just get back to the bus." The three of us exited the house, glancing around warily as we crossed the yard and climbed back onto the bus. "Anything?" Greg asked as soon as they were inside. Kev tossed the note onto the dashboard. "Found this in the kitchen. Says my parents went to dance class." "Dance class?" Greg's eyebrows shot up. "Are you serious? My parents told me the same thing before they left. They said it was something new they were trying out." Everyone fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Demi, sitting close to me, leaned forward, her expression troubled. That's not just a coincidence. Wes crossed his arms. So, what? All of our parents suddenly decided to take up dancing on the same night? During this chaos? Sounds fishy. Claire nodded slowly. And it explains why none of us could get a hold of them after everything started. Kev leaned back in his seat, his arms crossed. The only adult we reached was T's uncle. I looked at the group. We need answers. Let's check out one more house before heading to Tommy's uncle. Maybe someone else's place will give us more clues. The others exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. As Greg restarted the bus, the eerie silence of the city surrounded us once more, leaving us with more questions than answers. The bus rumbled down the cracked streets, the only sound breaking the tense silence apart from the occasional creak of its frame. Everyone was on edge, scanning the empty cityscape for any sign of danger. Greg kept his hands firm on the wheel, navigating cautiously. Claire's house is just a couple more blocks, Wes said, pointing ahead. Demi leaned forward. I just hope we... Stop the bus, I cut in. Greg frowned. What? Why? What do you see? Just stop the damn bus, I snapped, already rising from my seat. Greg hit the brakes, and the bus came to a screeching halt. The group lurched forward slightly, and everyone turned to me, confused. What's going on? Claire asked. I didn't answer. I was already at the door, wrench in one hand and revolver in the other. Without hesitation, I threw the door open and bolted down the street. Greg, Kev, and Tommy rushing after me. You idiot! Greg shouted under his breath as he ran. The house ahead came into view as we rounded the corner, and the sight explained everything. 3 lurkers, their towering, animalistic forms illuminated faintly by the streetlights, prowled around a small house. Their claws scraped against the siding, and their yellow eyes glowed menacingly. Ashley's house. I didn't pause. I ran straight for them, shouting at the top of my lungs to draw their attention. Hey, over here, you freaks! The lurkers snapped their heads toward me in unison, their glowing eyes narrowing. The first one let out a guttural snarl and charged towards me, its claws digging into the pavement with each loping step. Casey? Tommy yelled, sprinting after me. Greg and Kev followed, both gripping their weapons tightly. I raised the revolver, my hand trembling slightly as I fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the street. The bullet struck the charging lurker in the shoulder, causing it to stagger and roar in pain, but it didn't stop. I sidestepped at the last moment, swinging the wrench at its side with all my strength. The impact was solid, and the creature stumbled further, but it quickly turned to face me again. Tommy, left, Greg shouted, charging at the second lurker as it broke off to flank me. He swung his baseball bat at its legs, the impact making a sickening crunch, but the creature retaliated with a wild swipe of its claws. Greg barely dodged, stumbling back. Kev joined Tommy in facing the third lurker, which was slower but no less dangerous. It reared back, its claws ready to strike. Stick and move, Tommy yelled, jabbing with his screwdriver while Kev swung his wrench in a wide arc. The teamwork forced the creature to retreat a few steps, snarling in frustration. I managed to put some distance between myself and the first lurker. I aimed again and fired another shot, this time hitting it squarely in the chest. The lurker let out a pained howl but continued its relentless pursuit. I swung my wrench again, connecting with its jaw, and finally the creature collapsed. Tommy and Kev worked in tandem to take down the second lurker. As it lunged at Kev, Tommy stabbed at its side with his pocket knife, giving Greg the opening to swing his tire iron directly into its head. The impact cracked loudly, and the creature fell to the ground motionless. We all managed to outmaneuver the final weekend lurker, taking turns landing blows until it, too, collapsed with a final wheeze. The street fell silent except for our heavy breathing. "Casey!" a voice called from the house. Everyone turned to see Ashley poking her head out of an upstairs window. Her wide eyes met mine, and a mix of relief and shock crossed her face. "Ashley," I called back, lowering my weapons. "Are you okay? Is anyone else with you?" "No, I'm alone," she replied, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? What's going on?" I took a step closer, my heart racing, but Tommy grabbed my arm. "We need to get her out of there. Now's not the time for a reunion speech." I nodded. "We're getting you out, Ashley. Stay there." Ashley gave a small nod and disappeared back into the house. Greg clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You're lucky we're as crazy as you are, man." I smirked faintly, though my hand still shook. "Thanks, guys. I'll go get her, and then we leave before more of them show up." My heart pounded as I stepped through the front door of Ashley's house. My wrench gripped tightly in my hand. The interior was eerily quiet, save for the faint creaks of the house settling. "Ashley!" I called out. Footsteps thundered down the stairs, and then she was there. Ashley, alive and whole. Relief flooded me as she ran into my arms in a tight hug. I dropped my wrench and hugged her back just as fiercely, burying my face in her shoulder. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I'm fine," she assured me, her wide eyes scanning my face. "But, Casey, what's going on? What are those things? Why are you even here?" "We don't have time to explain everything right now," I said, taking her hand. "We need to get you out of here. Come on." She nodded, and we made our way outside, where my friends waited. Tommy raised an eyebrow at me, smirking faintly. The knight in shining armor. "Not the time, T," I muttered. As we all started heading back to the bus, Ashley began explaining what had happened. "I've been here all night," she said. "I was grounded for sneaking out to meet a friend, so my dad said I wasn't allowed to leave the house. He got a call from the mayor and left in a hurry. I haven't seen him since." "Your dad's the sheriff, right?" Greg asked. Ashley nodded. "Yeah, he said it was an emergency, but he didn't tell me what it was about." "That tracks," I muttered. More secrets. As we walked, we started to piece things together, murmuring about the strange behavior of our parents and the escalating chaos in the town. But as we neared the bus, Kev froze, his expression darkening. "Guys, look." We all turned to see what he was staring at. In the distance, a group of lurkers was approaching, their hulking figures cutting ominous silhouettes against the faint glow of streetlights. There were more of them than we had ever seen before, moving together with a terrifying coordination. "Crap!" Tommy breathed, gripping his pocket knife tighter. Greg's voice wavered. "We need to go. Now." We broke into a run, sprinting toward the bus. Greg climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine, the others piling in behind him. But as I helped Ashley up the steps, I glanced back at the advancing horde and knew the truth. The bus was too slow. We wouldn't make it far before the lurkers caught up. My stomach sank, but I made my decision. I turned to Ashley, cupping her face in my hands. "Ashley, you're going to be okay." "What?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" I kissed her deeply, my heart breaking as I pulled away. "I'll meet you all at the bridge," I promised. "The one that leads out of town. Just go. I'll draw them away." "No, Casey, no." Ashley grabbed my arm, but I gently pulled away. Demi was at the door now, her face a mixture of anger and panic. "Casey, don't do this." "I have to," I said firmly. I turned to my friends. "Get her out of here. Keep Demi safe. That's all I'm asking." Kev tried to step forward, but Greg grabbed his arm. "He's not changing his mind," Greg said quietly, his jaw clenched. "We have to go." "Casey, you better keep your word," Tommy said, his voice low and raw. "I will," I said, stepping back. "Go, I'll see you all at the bridge." The bus doors closed, and I watched as Greg floored the gas. The engine roared, and the bus sped off down the street, its taillights disappearing into the night. I turned back to face the lurkers, gripping my wrench tightly. "All right," I muttered to myself. I steadied my breathing, clutching the revolver tightly in my hand. All of a sudden, it started to rain. The rain pelted against my face, mixing with the sweat dripping down my forehead. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve, glancing down at the revolver. 4 bullets left. No room for error. Raising the gun to the sky, I fired a single deafening shot. The sound echoed through the empty streets like a thunderclap. The lurkers, drawn to the sharp noise, immediately turned their attention to me, their glowing eyes locked onto mine, their movements becoming faster and more frenzied as they bounded towards me. Without waiting another second, I bolted. My legs pumped furiously, splashing through puddles as the rain intensified. The cold droplets soaked my clothes and clung to my skin, but I didn't care. Every ounce of my focus was on reaching the old power plant. The path to the plant was etched into my memory. Ashley and I had come here countless times on stolen nights when she snuck out of her house. It was our secret spot since it wasn't far from her house. Now, it was my only chance to survive. Behind me, the guttural growls and heavy footsteps of the lurkers grew louder. I didn't dare to look back, but I could feel them closing the distance. My breath came in ragged gasps, my sneakers slipping slightly on the rain-slick pavement. They had been white once, but now they were muddy, torn, and soaked through. I ignored the sting of the cold water seeping through them and pushed myself harder. The power plant loomed ahead, its skeletal structure casting eerie shadows in the dim light. I ducked through the broken chain-link fence and vaulted over a pile of rubble, finally reaching the plant's entrance. The lurkers were still on my trail, their snarls echoing in the empty space. Panting, I quickly scanned the area. The interior of the power plant was a maze of rusting machinery, broken pipes, and abandoned equipment. A plan started to form in my mind. I sprinted toward an old control panel near a cluster of loose wiring and broken gas canisters. The place had been shut down for years, but some of the old machinery looked intact enough to cause some damage if used right. I took out the wrench from my pocket and started loosening one of the valves on the canisters. It hissed to life, releasing a faint cloud of gas into the air. Okay, I whispered to myself, gripping the wrench tightly. I crouched low behind a cluster of pipes, trying to control my breathing as the first lurker burst into the room. The creature's glowing yellow eyes scanned the area, its claws scraping along the metal floor as it sniffed the air. Its movements were twitchy and erratic, like it was on the verge of losing what little humanity it had left. The others weren't far behind. I could hear their heavy footsteps closing in. Just a little closer, I thought, raising the revolver. When the first lurker stepped near the gas canisters, I fired. The bullet struck the floor with a sharp clang, creating a loud noise that sent the creature into a frenzy. It swiped at the air, growling, and the others charged in, drawn to the commotion. I gritted my teeth, aiming carefully at the valve I had loosened. I pulled the trigger. The bullet hit its mark, and the gas canister erupted in a deafening explosion. Flames burst outward, engulfing the lurkers in a blinding inferno. The shockwave knocked me back, slamming me against a nearby wall. Groaning, I pushed himself up, coughing as smoke filled the air. The lurkers were still moving, their charred bodies thrashing wildly, but the explosion had slowed them down significantly. One collapsed, writhing on the floor before going still. Another stumbled, its movements jerky and disoriented. I didn't waste any time. I sprinted toward the exit, weaving through the chaos. I had one bullet left and a slim chance of making it out alive, but I wasn't about to give up. The rain greeted me as I emerged from the power plant, the cool droplets washing away the grime and sweat from my face. I glanced back just once, seeing the flickering flames inside the building and the shadows of the remaining lurkers struggling to escape. "See you at the bridge," I muttered to myself, gripping the wrench and revolver tightly as I disappeared into the woods. And just like that, it's not over. The road ahead is darker, and there's more waiting beyond the bridge. If you've made it this far, stay with me, because Part 4 is coming soon. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you won't want to face this alone.